Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for giving up your afternoons and listening in to today's webinar. We're very fortunate today to have Dr. Rachel Barron, who is the head of training and development here at Asia Edit, and she'll be talking to Dr. Timothy Teo, who is the professor and associate dean of the Department of Educational Psychology at Chinese University of Hong Kong. Um, if I give a little introduction on Professor Teo, I'm sure he won't mind. Professor Teo is the founding editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Quantitative Research and Education, and is the current editor-in-chief of the Asia Pacific Education Researcher. His career has taken him across the globe from Singapore initially, and we were just discussing. He's been working in Macau, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand, but for the last few years has been residing here in Hong Kong. So with that, I shall bow out and I shall let Rachel um, take the floor with Tio.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thanks for the introduction. Okay, thank you for joining us, Professor Teo. We're really pleased to have you here, and I'm really interested in what you have to say. I was just before we started, I was explaining that my background is quite similar. I was an academic in psychology, so this is certainly a very interesting interview for me to conduct. So I'm just going to start by asking you to tell us about your current research interests and your ongoing projects at the moment. So just tell us about some of the most interesting things that you're working on right now, so we get an idea of what your current area is.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Um, well, I have many projects going on at the same time. Some of the projects include systematic reviews, meta-analysis, uh, large-scale studies involving topics such as computer self-efficacy, language education. Of course, you can't rule out AI nowadays. Yeah,
Yes.
and robots in language learning. So currently, these are some of the topics I'm looking at. Generally, my research will include three different areas, and these are educational technology, educational psychology, and quantitative methods. Because I collaborate with colleagues from many countries outside where I work full time currently in Hong Kong. I work and collaborate with many researchers who are using qualitative methodology as well. So, in other words, I do work using both types of methodologies. Broadly speaking, all my works will have one way or another be related to issues within education, such as teacher education, professional development of teachers, students learning, so on and so forth.
Okay, that's a really just such a broad range of research that you're involved in there, and that just I guess shows how things have developed and expanded throughout your career. One thing that I really picked up on there is really I find really interesting, because it is very topical at the moment, is your work on AI and robotics. Can you just expand on that a little bit and say what that project's about?
Yeah, recently we completed a meta-analysis on the robots-assisted language learning. Yeah, we call it RALL, R-A-L-L. It'll be published in one of the top journals in educational review. Amongst other things, we found that as it stands currently, the use of robots is most effective when they are employed in classrooms amongst primary school students compared to those who are below and those who are above that age range. Yeah, so this is the one of the significant findings. Other things include the fact that there's evidence in the literature. Of course, the literature is quite immature as it stands now. That there's evidence that robots will be, have their presence very much increased in the years to come. And we hope, based on our evidence, policymakers can pick up and quickly implement the use of robots in the primary schools, particularly in the lower primary, for purposes of learning vocabulary, inculcating social skills, building competence in interaction between the robots and the children and amongst the children themselves. So these are some of the interesting findings we found in our meta-analysis.
That's fascinating, and yeah, it sounds like you're a real advocate of it. So you're very much pushing for the introduction or the rolling out of more AI across education.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. So to get all this research done, you obviously need to apply for research funding for grant applications. So I know that one of your areas of expertise that will be of really, really great interest to our audience is your success in writing grant applications. So I'm sure they'd appreciate it if you could give them any advice at all about how to improve their chances of funding success. Can you just tell me what you think makes a good funding application?
I think writing a funding application is a very complex activity. Yeah, there are many factors that are involved, and I will just summarize them by giving 3 points. I think the first point is when you apply for a grant, you need to know your audience. You need to know who is going to read it, what they are like, their level of expertise or specialist knowledge in this topic for which you have put in your grant application. And these are all very important factors. How do you know your audience? You need to read, be familiar, find out, and then do research about this group of people or this particular organization who is going to assess and decide on your application, and if successful, the amount you're going to get. Yeah. Also research and find out about previously approved application from this organization. So if I'm talking to my colleagues in Hong Kong, one of the major official funders of research grants will be the UGC or the RGC. Yeah, so the RGC has got an excellent website where they place all the previously approved funding applications online. Read about it, see how people, write, what they did, the kind of topics that will be picked up in the successful grant application. The second point I want to talk about is know your research area. Be very well versed in what you're proposing to research. And by research, I'm not just talking about the substantive part. Substantive refers to the knowledge. So imagine if I'm going to apply for a grant to say, examine the motivation amongst young children to interact with robots. So it is not just motivation and robots and young children's learning alone. It's got a lot to do with the theories around them, previous research, current research, what are the issues, the challenges, and the methodology that are used, all right, previously, and what are the major methodology scholars within this community are talking about. Understand them, use them, apply them, and write it into the grant application. Last but not least, especially in Asia, including myself, we are non-native English speakers. We need to learn about writing. Yeah. You may have an excellent idea. You may be able to articulate the idea very well. But when you put in a grant application, you don't get an opportunity to talk, except for very few grants. You don't get an opportunity most of the time to talk to the assessors, to try to convince them orally with your body language, you know. So the only thing that they will get to see is this stack of papers in which you have expressed and explicated your ideas in writing. So the writing must be watertight, must be clear, must be simple, and I've said this many, many times, must be written in such a way that non-specialists can understand. Yeah, as academics, if you are an academic, you are very good, you're an expert in your research field. It is always very tempted to say things in a very, very complex and sophisticated manner. But when you're talking about grant application, your dossier will be seen by many, many people whose expertise cannot reach your level. So you must put yourself in their shoes, write it in a language um, to express the significance, the methodology, and why these people should all agree to grant you the amount of money you're asking for. So basically 3 points I can think of at this moment: know the audience, know your research areas well, and write or learn how to write well.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a really comprehensive answer. And the last point, of course, is particularly interesting to us because we edit so many grant applications come the RGP season.
Yes,
as we
and
call
I
it.
think you can identify with me. You know exactly what I meant,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
A
Yeah.
lot of my colleagues, including people from overseas and within Hong Kong, they are brilliant, intelligent academics. Yeah. But sometimes because of the nature of the knowledge that they possess, unless they possess certain language skills, it is very difficult for them to write in
Yes.
ways that laymen can understand straight away. You know,
Yes.
without
And
having to, yeah, without
I
having to
don't think
refer
it's
to the
even,
dictionary.
yes, I don't think it's even restricted to those whose first language isn't English. I think, like, if you're an expert in a topic, it's in a subject, it's actually really hard to take yourself back and imagine how somebody outside that field would be able to understand what you're talking about, because you know it so well. It's so, you know, it's so in depth, and it's just being able to see how it comes across to another person and how they can understand.
You're absolutely right. And one thing I found on this point about writing is that before I submit anything that includes manuscript for journal publication, I'd like to find an opportunity to get a colleague, a friend, an educated person who has nothing to do with the grant application or the journal manuscript to just at least look at the abstract and then say back in their own words what they think this is all about. And that is a good way, or that serves as a mirror to me in terms of what the extent to which my words can be understood by people who do not possess specialist knowledge in that field.
Excellent. Yeah, really, really good advice. So the whole process of grant application, of receiving funding, is really quite fraught and very, very difficult. So is there anything that you could say to researchers who've experienced several rejections and are getting frustrated, feeling like they may never succeed in actually getting funding, the funding that they need?
I think anybody who has been academia for a while would have had their application rejected, hopefully more acceptance than rejection. My conclusion is there's absolutely no guarantee. Every application is assessed on its own merits. It's a little bit like journal publication. You may have succeeded in publishing in a certain journal, or you may have succeeded in winning grants from a certain body. Every new application will be assessed on its own. So in other words, you can't talk about trends, you can't really talk about trajectory. You can't say that somebody who has won 3 grants in the past 5 years will definitely win the next one. Yeah, because the people who are assessing the grants will be thinking of a lot of different things and given very different sets of instructions when they consider the grant application. So I think we should be looking at if your grant application is rejected, there are 2 ways to look at it. One, you improve on the application in the form it currently stands, or you deviate by either changing the topic or writing a new grant application altogether. Yeah, I mean, it's easier said than done, but I think when our application gets rejected, all of us, no matter how experienced or how eminent a professor may be, do feel bad. Yeah, but like I said to many of my colleagues, you are in this job and applying for grant is an integral part of your job amongst many other things. Yeah, it is important to your department, to the faculty, and to the university you belong. So there isn't any other choice except to, continue, be good at it, learn about how to do it better, learn from the colleagues who have been successful in winning grants, find out what works, and stop doing what don't. Yeah, so these are some of my personal practices, some of the things I apply onto myself. Granted that every
Yes.
rejection doesn't, bring a very good feeling to oneself.
Absolutely. No, it's not an easy thing, is it, to receive that rejection letter? But yes, hope words will encourage people to keep on persisting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so another area that I wanted to cover, you also have considerable experience as an editor-in-chief for, first with the International Journal of Quantitative Research in Education, and currently as the editor-in-chief of the Asia-Pacific Education Researcher. So again, many early research, career researchers find it challenging to get their first few papers accepted for publication. Can you share your top tips for journal submission and maximizing your chances of acceptance?
In today's publishing environment, most manuscripts go through at least two stages of screening. The first stage will be that with the editor-in-chief or the managing editor, as they are called in some journals. So the managing or editor-in-chief will look at the manuscript and decide straight away whether to send this manuscript out for external review or not. All right, and if they feel that this manuscript is not of sufficient quality to survive the external review process, they will then reject it straight away. This is called desktop rejection. Yeah. And then if the editor thinks that a particular manuscript has a good chance of surviving the external review process, then the editor-in-chief will generally assign this manuscript to an associate editor or somebody else who will then initiate the external review process. Yeah. So some of the things that as an editor-in-chief, some of the things I look at the onset before I assign it to one of my associate editors to proceed with the external review process will be the title. Yeah, is the title clear enough? Is the idea represented in the title something current, something novel? Yeah, or is it an area that has been researched very much already. So what is new? What is current? That's in my mind. Yeah, and one way to do this is to make sure, again, simplicity is the key. Make sure the title is clear. I also look at the abstract, the abstract, which is basically a summary of the whole manuscript. Yeah, so the abstract should contain the aims of the study, methodology in brief, brief results, findings, what are some of the conclusions in the study before I decide whether to perform a desktop rejection or to send it out to one of my associate editors. And the third thing I want to say is something that is so simple, but many people do not do it. And that is, when you submit a manuscript to a journal, you should spend time and put in the effort to format your manuscript in the way the journal expects. Yeah, easily done, easily done. But many people don't think that is important. And always remember, if you are submitting a manuscript to a top journal, that journal would have received on average more than 1,000 and some even 2,000 and above submissions in a year. All right. And these journals generally manage about not more than 100 manuscripts a year. So you're talking about over 90% of rejection. And if you show that, if you do not format your manuscript in the way the journal expects, then this behavior could well be interpreted as you don't really care whether your work gets published in the journal or not. You may not think that way as an author, but it certainly projects that impression to the editor or the handling editor who is looking at the manuscript. Yeah. In education, many journals expect the manuscript to be formatted in APA style. Yeah. So some people, for example, and that's very stuck. Some people submitted their journal, the manuscript to one journal that uses the MLA style, and they get rejected. Then they submit it to another journal in exactly the same format, not knowing that the second journal would expect it to be formatted in an APA style. So this is what I'm talking about.
So it's a kind of showing the respect and the fact that you've actually taken the trouble, you've taken the time to notice what the journal is actually looking for and responded to that appropriately.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. The journal for which I'm editor-in-chief, we received close to 1,600 manuscripts in a year. It is not regarded as one of the top 10% journal, but it's a good journal. And yet we receive so many. But every year we only can publish not more than 80 articles. In other words, 1,800 minus 80, I can reject a lot of manuscript. So I'm hoping authors who submit manuscripts to my journal do not give me an immediate reason to reject their manuscripts and not
Yes.
conforming to journal requirements in formatting your manuscript certainly is one of them.
Yes. That's that's certainly true. Yes, and when you receive so many submissions, I imagine that that initial desk rejection, it's very easy if you can just see that somebody hasn't taken the trouble. So there's like a hurdle that you need to jump through at least to get to the reviewers, because you
You're
don't
so
have a chance.
right.
Yeah,
You're right. And I get many of this. Interestingly, I get many of this. Yeah.
Yes, interesting. Yes. So so assuming that they've got through this initial process and the paper's gone to review and it comes back from the reviewers and the researcher, like they read the feedback and oh lo and behold, they have to make extensive changes, like revisions to the paper. Do you think that that's a cause for a researcher to feel despondent, or is that an encouraging sign?
Well, in my earlier days, you're talking about a few decades ago. In those days, yes, there is a good reason to feel despondent, to feel very discouraged, feel depressed when your manuscript is not given a minor revision or it is not accepted straight away. In today's publishing environment, my view is as long as you're given a chance to revise a manuscript, never mind whether it is major or minor, right, or extensive, as long as you are given a chance, I say you have succeeded 50% already. Why? Because you have to understand that while you are given a chance to revise a manuscript, many hundreds are not given that chance. So I say to all colleagues out there who are listening, regardless of which journal you send your manuscript to, as long as you're given a chance, the message that the editor is trying to give to you is, I think it has something we want. I think it is not useless or without value, but I think you can improve it to the standard we expect for our journal. That's the kind of message you should have in your mind when you're invited to revise. Um, Remembering that there are hundreds and thousands of manuscripts that were just that would have been just rejected either at the desktop level by the editor-in-chief or after an initial review.
So a rejection like that, or not a rejection, but this request for extensive revisions should be turned around and seen as a positive at the
That's
end of
right.
the.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Keeping in mind, like I said, there are hundreds and thousands who are not given that opportunity, whether it is an extensive revision, major or minor revision, right? So I say keep working at it. And there's no guarantee when you're invited to revise your manuscript. But my observation as an author and as an editor-in-chief is so long as you are diligent, right, in addressing the comments of the reviewers, um, even if there are subsequent revisions on your manuscript, uh, the situation is likely to get better. Yeah. There's no telling how many revision will be the maximum. I've experienced 6 revision and still have my manuscript rejected. Yeah.
Wow.
I have seen people revising once and got their manuscripts accepted straight away. Yeah. But the message I want to send is take this opportunity to revise as something very positive, especially in today's publication environment.
And is there anything they can do, like when on that resubmission, like is there anything that you would advise them how they respond to the reviewers' comments? Is there any particular tips that you can give people on how they do that? What really impresses you when somebody sends back a paper that has had substantial revisions? What do you like to see?
Okay, yeah. Because we're all dealing with academics, and in most cases, when we talk about revising a particular manuscript, chances are the comments and the feedback would be academic in nature. So questions may be asked about methodology, clarify the methodology for the author to elaborate on the theoretical framework, for example, for the author to consider certain paragraph, rewriting certain paragraph for clarity, so on and so forth. Yeah. And it is possible that at the receiving end, the author may feel annoyed or displeased and unhappy with the way reviewers have given their comments, or reviewers have sometimes, obviously, they've not read the manuscript in detail, or they missed certain messages, so on and so forth. So I always tell my colleagues, especially the younger colleagues, whatever the reviewers said, respond in the most polite way. If you disagree with them, you respond in a polite way, but in a firm manner. And do not stop there. Explain why you disagree with them in a substantive way. Do not say, I disagree with the reviewer on this point. Full stop. Any reviewer will be unhappy. And always remember, reviewers and editors-in-chief are also human beings. Yeah. Unfortunately, in the way academic publishing is happening now, reviewers and editors have the upper hand. So if you really want to publish in a particular journal, you act professionally. You keep your annoyance and unhappiness to yourself, but you respond in a professional manner. If you agree with the reviewer's comment, state very clearly what you have done to address their comments. If you disagree with the reviewers, be polite yet firm to say you disagree, but continue to explain the cause of your disagreement. And you may even want to provide an alternative view to that of the reviewers when explaining your disagreement. I think if we respond to this with an attitude of humility and a sense of professionalism, most reviewers, I would say 90% of them, they will see that you're not being personal, but you're being professional, even though you disagree with them. My sense is that, and I've seen this in the manuscripts that I published for myself, my sense is most reviewers will or are likely to respect that. Yeah.
Yes.
If you respond in a reactive, confrontational, aggressive manner, then I think you're not going to benefit from that kind of behavior.
No, or just a dismissive way of just not really responding to the point at all, and just, as you say, not giving a real explanation as to why you disagree, but just leaving it unexplained.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, in my journals, because I have access to all the reviews, all the revisions, all the manuscript, and all the names and details. And there have been cases where my reviewers recommended reject even after the second or the third revision.
Yeah.
And majority of the cases would be because the reviewers felt that the issues have not been addressed adequately enough.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not about whether there's spelling mistake or there's grammar mistakes in the revised manuscript. It is often the responses and the reaction of the author. And this matters greatly to the reviewers who are reading it second, third, or even fourth time. Bearing in mind that editors, or a large percentage of them, and if not all, the majority of the reviewers, they are not paid for their services. Yeah, they are just doing this as a form of their contribution to the academic community. And they put in the effort to review the manuscript. When they comment and recommend something to be done, then it is natural for them to expect a fair and reasonable response from the author, rather than something that is rude, blunt, or even a non-response.
Yes. Excellent. That's really good advice. We're time's running on, and I really wanted to just look back a little bit at your career, and just to but in particular, I'm interested in your experience overseas? Because for a lot of researchers, I think there's a big decision to be made at various points in your career as to do you go abroad, do you stay where you are in the familiar university perhaps, or in familiar environment? So could you explain or just discuss a little bit about your experiences abroad and what they have contributed to your career? Presumably like, opportunities for collaboration and all that kind of thing will come into that. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I would start by saying, I was born in Singapore, raised in Singapore. I started my academic career in Singapore. And if you know how big or small Singapore is, then everywhere else in the world is bigger. Yeah. So from that perspective, yeah, even the neighboring country, Malaysia, is so much bigger than Singapore. Yeah. But I guess my movement from one place to another, they're all motivated by various kinds of reasons. And some of these, I would categorize them into personal and professional reasons. Personal reasons will involve family matters. Professional reasons will involve a chance to learn new things, a chance to work with different people, and of course, a chance to experience a different culture. Now, what has all this moving around benefited me? I think, firstly, it kind of changed and shaped my worldview a lot. Yeah. Um, I've come to the conclusion that, of course, this is cliche. Yeah. I've come to the conclusion really because I've lived and worked in supposedly Western countries, New Zealand, Australian, yeah. And I live and work in the East, Macau, Hong Kong, and Singapore, yeah. And I dare say that, if you look hard enough, you can find a lot of positive things you can enjoy in any of these places that we go to. As an academic, one of the attributes of being an academic is really an ability to listen, absorb, understand other people's viewpoint, assess, evaluate those viewpoints against your own, and then assimilate those viewpoints and be able to present it as a different viewpoint and be able to defend those viewpoints. So in all the kinds of, and this permeates through every aspects of life. Yeah. Of course, culturally, there are challenges, but if you look at things positively, challenges are also opportunities to learn and to grow. So my perspective in a lot of things that I do at work as an academic, they are largely shaped from my experiences in having to work in those different countries at the same time, having interacted with many people uh, which are very different culturally, educationally, socially, ideologically, and ethnically. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are so many things I can talk for hours, which we don't have. But if I could summarize and say in a nutshell, having worked in different countries and different culture, I think it's made me a more international person in terms of how I look at things. Yeah.
Do you think that's contributed? Not just I can understand completely what you're saying is about how it would change you personally, opening up, making you more open-minded and understanding other cultures and other points of view. How do you think that's affected your research? Do you think it has affected that as well?
Yes, I think it's affected quite a lot. And well, the positive aspects of things is because of my experiences and understanding of cultural nuances and differences, similarities. I have succeeded in being able to collaborate with people from the Middle East, people from the UK, US, and people from Greater China, people from Southeast Asia. So if you look at my publications, you'll see all sorts of names in there, Chinese names, Middle Eastern names, Iranian names, um, Serbian names, Spanish names. So these are the people with whom I've collaborated in research and co-authored manuscripts that have led to successful publications. So yes, indeed,
Yes,
a
because
good.
presumably whenever you're in a new university, then there are international colleagues there, not just from that country, but from all over the world. So you're
Absolutely,
being exposed
absolutely,
to,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to understand, unless besides Singapore, where I'm considered a local, everywhere I went, I was considered as a foreigner or an outsider. Yeah. So instead of feeling bad about being labeled as an outsider or foreigner, I turned that to my advantage. You know, in fact, I found it a lot of times. I found it beneficial that I could get away with things for being claiming to be, an outsider. Yeah. And that gives me room and opportunities to learn new things. It gives me
Yes.
access to information which otherwise may not have been available to, or may have been taken for granted by people who consider themselves as locals.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a really, really interesting talk. And we have some questions from the audience that I would like to move on to because it's time that we involved others. So first I'm going to ask one or two questions that we've already had sent in, and then we'll look at some questions that the audience, I think, are uploading at the moment, or asking in the chat at the moment. Somebody has asked, what are the latest research achievements and directions in the education fields?
I believe I've got a few seconds to answer the question, but really to
It's too
answer
long.
that question adequately, I'll need about 5 to 10 hours. Well, that's
Okay,
a very,
a very brief summary, very
very
brief.
general question. All right, so
Yes.
if I were to imagine I'm speaking to a colleague who's new to educational research, yeah, so these are the things I would say. First, be very good in your research area. Yeah. So you may be a specialist in, say, language education. You may be a specialist in early childhood education. Yeah. First, be very good. Make sure you achieve expertise in that substantive area. All right. Then think of how you relate that to education. Question is, what is educational research? To me, as a professor of education, educational research, broadly defined, must have something to do with teaching and learning. However, you operationalize these two words. All right. So you could be doing research in the philosophy of using robots in early childhood setting. I mean, sounds so distant. But if you're able to relate and draw inferences from that research into teaching and learning, I call that educational research. And that will be significant research in education. All right. So I'm not going to give objective answers where you can tick off. But broadly speaking, I think if you are good, firstly, you must be good in your area. And then you must learn from colleagues, from reading materials, from experience, learn how to relate your research into education. Then I say you're doing significant educational research.
And a slightly different take on the same question is really is what are the key issues, especially in Asia? So one of our questions from the audience.
Asia is a huge continent. I don't know whether you're talking about South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, because these issues vary from one region to another, from one country to another country. Now, if I were to state a general observation, I would say, and also from my experience as an editor-in-chief, from the thousands of manuscripts that I received in the last 12 years as the editor-in-chief of this Asia Pacific Education Researchers Journal, my take is one of the major issues amongst researchers, educational researchers in Asia, is around how do we evolve? Yeah, how do we evolve as a force, so to speak, to be reckoned? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the things that we learn, say in education, in psychology, sociology, language education, most of the theories, framework, and models, they all have been adapted, modified from scholars in the West. Yeah. So my take, if I were to pin down on something, is really this interest and this enthusiasm amongst the scholars, the community of Asian educational scholars, to how do we create something that can be seen as arising from Asia, instead of always having to take reference from, say, the US, from the UK, or from Europe. That
Okay.
that
Yeah.
is my take. Yeah.
Okay, so keep the research local. Is there?
Well, I mean, that's one way to do it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So and a question that we've just had in is, it goes back to my first question to you, is have you noticed any good uses of AI in recent journal submissions? And do you see AI as pushing research in positive ways?
Absolutely. Yes, got negative way, just like fire. Fire is a good servant, but a bad master. Yeah. And as in response to this, a lot of major publishers such as Taylor Francis, Sage, Springer, Elsevier, they have come up with guidelines and guidance notes for their editors, the editors of their journals. So one of the positive things I've seen is many people are using, say, AI or maybe ChatGPT for editing purposes. Yeah, and major editing providers such as yourself, you probably know about this. Yeah.
Yes.
So I've known of professors who are using AI to edit their work, perhaps check basic grammar, check vocabulary, and some syntax issues. Yeah, so I see those as something positive. Other positive influences of AI in manuscript preparation or manuscript writing will be translation. In several countries in Asia, the standard of English can be so poor that they can't write the first draft of their manuscript in English. So many of the scholars in these countries will be writing them in their native language. Yeah. And with the advent of AI, they are now able to engage whatever tools that they employ to provide a surface first cut translation from their native language into English, and subsequently continue to work at it before they can consider further editing by AI tools or maybe sending it to professional editing services. So these are some of my observation of the positive use of AI in manuscript preparation.
So you think that it can maybe level the playing field a little for researchers whose first language isn't English, who previously would have struggled to get their work
Absolutely.
accepted in an English language journal?
Previously
Yes.
impossible. Yeah, previously impossible. And
Yes.
I'm seeing some um, evidence of this happening, that we are receiving manuscripts from um, countries who are not known to be operating in English.
Very interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
we have been looking at AI very closely, of course, and it's a huge development in our industry in editing. We haven't found it yet to get very close to our own human editing standards, but we are working with it, trying to explore its possibilities for the future. So
I don't think
yes.
it's quite there to the human level yet,
No.
but I think give it another 5 years, 10 years, if nothing changes, all things being equal, the development of AI in terms of its capabilities may get very close to the human level. Yeah,
Yes, yes, we still do see a lot of problems at the moment with it changing the meaning and inventing things and deleting
yes,
references and
yes,
all this kind of
that's
thing.
right.
So we're still quite cautious, but
Yeah.
as you say, things develop very quickly in this field. I think we're just going to squeeze one very last question in. Okay. So what would be your takeaway messages to middle career researchers to enhance high quality international engagement and international collaboration with leading researchers in the world?
Okay. There are so many. Yeah, there are so many. Assuming I'm speaking to researchers who are working at university or institution with very good library resources. Yeah. Um, Look at the databases. For example, there is a database called SciVal produced by Elsevier. All right. So SciVal provides metrics for researchers, for institutions. And in these databases, you have access to information on different research fields, different research topics, and who are the top researchers in these fields and in this topic. Secondly, engage social media such as ResearchGate, yeah, academic.edu. Look at these web pages to see who has done what, who has been successful in producing what kind of works. Yeah, so use Google Scholar also as a reference to see who are the scholars in the field, who are the recognized personalities in the field, and if you find somebody whose work aligns with yours, send them an email. You can find anybody's email on the internet nowadays. Send them an email and invite them to be a collaborators. Most of them will reply. Not all. Most of them will reply. And if then you might find that slowly you will get mentored by an international researchers. I've done that to a lot of people. So do a lot of these kind of things, exploring, finding information, and be brave, be humble. Yeah. No matter how much you publish, how much you have achieved, there's a Chinese saying I enjoy very much, which is for every mountain there is one higher than it. Those people who are Chinese, you know which proverb I'm referring to. So however high you are, there always be a mountain higher than it. So be humble and be willing to learn. I think you do well if you are always thinking you have not reached there yet.
Excellent. That's a really, really nice positive note to end on. So thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I don't know if Nick or Felix has, Nick, do you have anything to ask before we leave?
Thank you very much, Professor Teo. I thought there were some very good tips in there. I can certainly identify with being the permanent outsider. I mean, I've now lived in Hong Kong for 30 plus years, and I'm still seen as an outsider. So I empathize with you in your travels overseas. But I think, yeah, I mean, we are going to, we have recorded this session, so we will upload it, and it'll be available for anyone who may want to go back and review some of the tips that you shared. I saw there were quite a few questions there on how to successfully submit GRF proposals, and you gave some very good ideas at the beginning of this talk. So some people who joined a bit later may have missed that. But look, thank you very much for your time this afternoon to both Dr. Rachel Barron and Professor Timothy Teo. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to our continued collaboration as we go forward. I should be sending you an email and asking you for tips and you to mentor me as well in future.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I've enjoyed this thoroughly, and it's an honor to be invited for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for those who joined us, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.